You're here. I'm glad you came. I've been waiting for you settled in by the fire with the night pressing quietly against the windows and a book in my lap. There's nowhere you need to be tonight, nothing you need to do. You only need to be here with me. Find a comfortable position now. Let your body settle into wherever you are, your bed, your chair, whatever is holding you tonight. Let it hold you completely. You don't have to hold yourself up anymore. Let your eyes close or let them grow soft and heavy. There's nothing you need to see right now. Take a slow breath in and let it go. Good. Let your breathing find its own slow rhythm now. Don't force it. Just breathe as the night breathes, slow and deep and without urgency. Now I'm going to guide you down through your body. We're going to let everything go, one piece at a time. By the time we're through, you'll be ready for the story. Bring your attention down to your feet. Notice them wherever they are, however they feel. Let them grow heavy now, heavy as the old stone flags in a long, cold hall. Imagine cool stone beneath your feet, smooth, worn by centuries, solid beyond measure, and feel the weight in your feet matching that solidity, heavy and still. Let that heaviness travel up into your ankles, the bones of your ankles, let them soften. Let the weight of a long day release down through your feet and into the floor beneath you. Now your calves, let them go. They've carried you far enough today. And your knees, let them unlock, let them rest. There's nothing to brace against here. Your thighs now heavy and warm, the weight of velvet settling over your legs. That's what it feels like. Rich, dark, warm, pressing gently down. Let your legs be still. Now your hips. Let the floor, let the bed, let whatever holds you, let it take the full weight of you. You don't have to hold on. Let that release travel up into your lower back, the small of your back, let it soften. Imagine warmth there, like the faint reach of a fire across an old stone room. Distant but present, safe. Now your belly, let it rise and fall freely. Don't hold it in, just breathe. Your chest now, with every breath out, let your chest soften a little more. Any tightness there, any weight you've been carrying without naming it, let it go with the breath. Your shoulders, I know you're carrying something there. You can put it down now. Just let them drop. Let them fall away from your ears, down and back, loose and heavy. Your upper arms, your elbows, your forearms resting now. And your hands. Let them rest exactly where they are. The cold doesn't reach you here. Your hands are warm and still, and the firelight moves softly across them. Now your throat. Let it soften. Every word you might have spoken today, every word you swallowed, you can let your throat be quiet now. Your jaw, let it go. Let your teeth part slightly. Let your tongue rest easy in your mouth. We hold so much tension in the jaw without ever noticing. Let it go. The corners of your eyes, the space between your brows, smooth it out. There's nothing to read here, nothing to watch for. Your eyes are resting. And your scalp, the crown of your head, let the very top of you be soft. Your whole body now, from your feet to the top of your head, heavy and warm and still, held safe. Good, you're doing beautifully. I have a book with me tonight, not just any book. I have a journal. It belongs to a young English solicitor. His name is Jonathan Harker. He wrote it in shorthand in a small notebook on a train heading east. The year was 1893. The countryside outside his window was becoming stranger with every mile. He was traveling to Transylvania on a matter of business, a castle, a client, a real estate transaction, or so he believed. He wrote carefully in his little notebook. He noted the food, the scenery, the names of the towns he passed through. He was a practical young man. He was not expecting anything extraordinary. He didn't know then what he was traveling toward. We know. But that's all right. We're safe here. We're inside, and the fire is low and warm, and the night outside is only the night. We're only reading. Jonathan Harker's journal is over 130 years old, and tonight I'm going to read it to you. Every word of it, across many long nights. But for now, just this moment, just your breath and the fire in my voice. Close your eyes if you haven't already. Breathe. I'll begin. Chapter 1. Jonathan Harker is a young solicitor from London. He keeps a careful journal. He writes in shorthand, small, precise marks in a leather-bound book. He is methodical. He is conscientious. He does not yet know what is waiting for him at the end of the road.
3rd of May, Bistritz. I left Munich at 8:30 in the evening on the 1st of May. By morning I had reached Vienna. The train was an hour late. Then came Budapest, a city I glimpsed only from the window and from a few cautious steps through the streets near the station. I did not want to go far. We were already running behind time. But even from the train window, crossing the Danube on the longest, most beautiful bridge I had ever seen, I felt it. A shift. The sense that we were leaving the West behind. That the East was beginning.
I want you to feel that if you can. Settle a little deeper into wherever you are now. Let the ordinary world grow softer at the edges. We are traveling with him, east, always east, towards something ancient and cold and waiting.
We arrived at Klausenburg after nightfall, and I stopped the night at the Hotel Royal. For supper, I had chicken cooked with red pepper. The waiter told me it was called paprika Händel. It was very good, but very thirsty making. I drank the entire carafe of water and still wanted more. I did not sleep well. There was a dog howling under my window all night. Long, mournful sounds, the kind that rise and fall with the wind and seem to have no end. In the morning, I had a hasty breakfast and hurried to catch the train. Or rather, I hurried to the station and then sat in the carriage for over an hour before we moved at all. It seems to me that the further east one travels, the less the trains respect their own timetables. But what a country! All day long we traveled through beauty. Little towns perched on steep hills like something from an old illustrated manuscript. Rivers running wide and stony, their banks swept clean by great seasonal floods. Apple trees, plum trees, cherry trees, all in blossom at once. The petals had fallen to the grass below, and the green was spangled with white and pink. The road wound through hills they call the middle land rising and falling, disappearing around grassy curves, then swallowed by the dark edge of pine woods that ran down the hillsides like tongues of dark flame. And beyond the middle land, rising up on all sides, the Carpathians themselves. Mountains. Real mountains. Deep blue and purple in the shadows of the peaks. Green and brown where grass and rock mingled. Snowy summits catching the afternoon sun, burning white against the open sky. Here and there, great rifts in the rock, and through them, as the sun began to sink, the white gleam of falling water. It was on the dark side of twilight when we reached Bistritz. An old place. A frontier place. Count Dracula had written to direct me here to the Golden Krone Hotel. I was evidently expected. An elderly woman in the local peasant dress was waiting at the door. "The Herr Englishman?" she said. "Yes," I told her. "Jonathan Harker." She smiled and had a letter brought out to me immediately. I will read it as he wrote it. "My friend, welcome to the Carpathians. I am anxiously expecting you. Sleep well tonight. At 3 tomorrow, the diligence will start for Bukovina. A place on it is kept for you. At the Borgo pass, my carriage will await you and will bring you to me. I trust that your journey from London has been a happy one and that you will enjoy your stay in my beautiful land. Your friend Dracula."
The name sits strangely in the air. Dracula. A name from another age.
4th of May. I tried this morning to ask my landlord about the Count and about the castle. Up until that moment he had understood my German perfectly well. The instant I mentioned Dracula, he pretended he could not understand a word. His wife, the same woman who had received me so warmly the evening before, looked at him, and he at her with a frightened sort of look. When I pressed them further, they crossed themselves. Both of them. And then they said nothing more. I did not have long to dwell on it, for the coach was almost ready to depart. But just as I was leaving, the old landlady came up to my room. She was in a state of considerable distress. "Must you go?" she said. O young hare, must you go? She was so agitated that she had lost her grip of her German and mixed it with words from some other language entirely. I tried to reassure her. I told her I had business to attend to and that I must leave at once. She took hold of my arm. Do you know what day it is? I said it was the 4th of May. She shook her head. Yes, I know that, but do you know what day it is? And then she told me. It is the eve of St. George's Day. Do you not know that tonight, when the clock strikes midnight, all the evil things in the world will have full sway? Do you know where you are going and what you're going to? She sank to her knees and begged me not to go. Or if I must go, to wait 1 day, 2 days, even 1 hour. It was sigh. It was very difficult not to be moved by her. However kind and earnest she was, I had my duty. I told her again, as gently as I could, that I had to leave. She rose then and dried her eyes, and she reached up to her own neck and unclasped a crucifix that she wore there and pressed it into my hand. I am an English churchman. I had been taught all my life to regard such things as well as bordering on the idolatrous. But she held it out with such genuine care, such clear devotion, that I could not refuse her. She placed it around my neck herself. For your mother's sake, she said. And she left the room. I am writing this while I wait for the coach, which is of course late. The crucifix is still around my neck. I do not know whether it is the old woman's fear or the strangeness of this place or the crucifix itself, but I find I am not quite as easy in my mind as I would like to be. Here comes the coach.
Let the image settle for a moment. The inn yard. The archway hung with oleander and orange trees in great green tubs. The small crowd gathered in the last light of the afternoon. And every one of them, every single person watching the coach prepare to leave, crossing themselves, pointing 2 fingers toward him as he climbed aboard. A guard against the evil eye. Not cruel. Not mocking. Sorrowful.
Fifth of May, the castle. The gray of the morning has passed, and the sun is high. I am not sleepy, and so I write. There is a great deal to put down. When I got onto the coach, there was already an atmosphere among the other passengers that I could not quite name. The driver had been speaking quietly with the landlady, and I noticed that now and then both of them glanced over at me. The people waiting on the bench outside the door, they murmured among themselves as I climbed up, and some of them looked at me with an expression I can only call pitying. I got out my small dictionary and tried to catch the words they were repeating. Ordog, Satan. Pokal, hell. Stragoika, witch. Vrolok, Volkoslak. 2 words in 2 different languages, both meaning the same thing. Werewolf, vampire. When we set off, the entire crowd made the sign of the cross. As one, all of them in the archway with the orange trees behind them. I will not pretend that it was comfortable.
But the beauty of the land did its work on him. As it does, the mountains rolled out ahead of us, green slopes dissolving into forest, forest climbing into dark pine, pine giving way to bare stone and snow. The afternoon was golden. The shadows were long and soft. For a time, all was well.
As the sun began to sink, everything changed. The shadows deepened and gathered and merged. By the roadside we passed crosses, small wooden ones, sometimes hung with faded offerings, and figures kneeling before roadside shrines, so absorbed in prayer they did not even look up as we swept past. The trees grew closer. Oaks, beeches, pines, their branches beginning to knit together overhead. The air turned cold. My fellow passengers grew very quiet. The driver urged the horses faster than felt safe on such a road, lashing them with his long whip, calling out to them in a kind of wild encouragement. I asked if I might walk on the steepest of the hills to ease the horses a little. The driver shook his head. No, no, you must not walk here. The dogs are too fierce. He paused, looked around at the others, and you may have enough of such matters before you go to sleep. No one laughed. When darkness fell, the passengers began speaking to the driver one after another, urging him to go faster still. The coach rocked and swayed on its springs like a boat in rough water. I gripped the side and held on. And then, through the darkness, I could see a gray cleft in the hills ahead. We were entering the Borgo Pass. One by one, the passengers turned to me. They pressed small gifts into my hands, each one giving quietly with a word of blessing, with a gesture I had come to recognize. The sign of the cross. The raised 2 fingers. They would not explain. None of them. The eastern side of the pass opened before us. Dark clouds overhead. A weight in the air oppressive, electric, like the moment before thunder. The Count's carriage was supposed to meet us here. I looked into the darkness. There was nothing. only the flicker of our own lamps and the white steam rising from the horse's flanks. The driver looked at his watch and murmured something to the others that I could barely hear. Then he turned to me. There is no carriage here. The hare is not expected after all. He will now come on to Bukovina and return tomorrow or the next day. Better the next day. At that moment, the horses began to neigh and plunge and rear. And from behind us, from out of the dark, a caleche came forward. 4 coal-black horses, moving fast, overtaking us, pulling up alongside. The driver was tall, with a long brown beard and a great black hat pulled low over his face. I could see very little of him, only his eyes bright, very bright, and in the lamplight they seemed, for a moment, almost red. He looked at our driver and said quite calmly, "You are early tonight, my friend." The other man stammered that the English hare had been in a hurry. The stranger smiled. "That is why, I suppose, you wished him to go on to Bukovina. You cannot deceive me, my friend. I know too much, and my horses are swift." The lamplight fell across his face as he smiled, and I saw his mouth clearly for a moment. Hard lips. Very red. Teeth sharp and white as ivory. One of the passengers whispered to another, a line from some old poem. In German, den die Toten reiten schnell. For the dead travel fast. The strange driver heard it. He looked toward them with a gleaming smile. The passenger turned his face away. My bags were handed across with extraordinary speed and willing hands. I descended from the coach. As I did, the driver reached down and helped me, and his grip on my arm was like iron, a grip of steel. I would not forget that grip. Without a word, he shook the reins. The horses turned, and we swept into the darkness of the pass. I looked back once. The steam from the other horses lit by their own lamps. The figures of my late companions all making the sign of the cross. Then the driver cracked his whip, and they were gone. A cloak was thrown over my shoulders. A rug was laid across my knees. The driver spoke without turning round. "The night is chill, mine Herr, and my master the Count bade me take all care of you. There is a flask of Slivovitz plum brandy beneath the seat, if you should require it." I did not take any, but it was a comfort to know it was there.
The road wound on, and I need you to feel what it was like to be in that carriage, in that dark, moving through those mountains. the cold coming through the cloak. The trees pressing close on both sides of the road, branches arching overhead until the sky was completely gone. The smell of pine and snow and wet stone. And silence. A particular kind of silence. Not peaceful. Held.
I struck a match at some point to check the time. It was within a few minutes of midnight. Then, far down the road, from somewhere in a farmhouse lost in the dark, a dog began to howl. A long, agonized sound, like fear made audible. And then another dog took up the cry. And another. And another. Until the whole dark countryside was full of it. A rising tide of howling carried on the wind through the pass. The horses strained and reared. The driver spoke to them quietly. They settled, but they shivered and sweated as though they had been badly frightened. Then, from the mountains themselves, from both sides of us at once, came the wolves. A louder sound, deeper, closer. I will not pretend I was not afraid. My first thought was to jump from the carriage and run. The horses had the same instinct. They plunged and reared and nearly bolted. The driver descended. He stood before the horses and spoke to them softly, steadily, with a hand on each of their heads in turn. I have heard of men who can tame horses with their voice alone, but I have never seen anything like this. The horses grew still. They trembled, but they were still. We drove on through the dark. The trees closed over us. The wind moaned through the rocks and crashed the branches together above our heads. Fine, powdery snow had begun to fall, covering everything white. The baying of the wolves grew nearer. And then I saw it. A small, faint blue flame. Off to the left side of the road. Not a lantern. Not a torch. A blue flame, hovering low, casting no light on the ground around it. The driver stopped the horses immediately. He jumped down and disappeared into the darkness. I heard nothing. I saw nothing. Only the horses trembling in their harness and the howling of the wolves somewhere in the dark beyond the trees. Then he was back, without a word. And we moved on. This happened more than once. I cannot say exactly how many times. I think I may have drifted between sleeping and waking, The whole sequence of the blue flames and the silent stops and the drivers disappearing into the dark, it took on the quality of a dream. Once the flame appeared very close to the road, close enough that I could watch him by its faint light. He went to where the flame burned, gathered some small stones from the ground, and arranged them in a kind of pattern. And then, and I do not know how to explain this gasp as he stood between me and the flame, I could still see the flame. Through him, as though he were not entirely there. I told myself my eyes were deceiving me. I told myself it was the dark and the cold and the strangeness of the night.
Breathe. You are safe wherever you are right now. Warm. Still. We are only reading a journal. Only listening to a story. The wolves are very far away.
At last there came a time when the driver went further than he had yet gone. And while he was away, the horses began to tremble worse than before. Snorting. Screaming almost. The howling of the wolves had ceased. And that was somehow worse. The moon came out. It sailed through a gap in the clouds and fell upon the road and upon the trees on both sides. And I saw them. A ring of wolves all around us. White teeth. Red tongues. Long, sinewy bodies, utterly still, watching. They were 100 times more terrible in their silence than they had been when they were howling. I cannot name it well, a kind of paralysis, not panic. Something deeper than panic. The understanding that there is nothing to be done. Then the wolves began to howl again, all at once, as though the moonlight had released them. The horses reared and strained, rolling their eyes in terror. I shouted for the driver. I could not see him. I beat my hands on the side of the caleche, hoping to frighten the wolves away from one side to give him a path back. And then I heard his voice. Not loud, but with a quality of command that I had not heard in a human voice before. I looked toward the sound. He was standing in the roadway. His arms were raised and sweeping wide, as though pushing back something invisible. And the wolves fell back. Back. Further back still. A heavy cloud passed across the moon. Darkness again. When I could see, the wolves were gone. The driver was climbing back into his seat. He said nothing. He shook the reins. We moved on. I was afraid to speak. I was almost afraid to move. The time seemed endless as we climbed higher and higher through the dark. Up through the mountains, into thinner air and deeper cold and deeper silence. And then, without any warning at all, for I must indeed have been half asleep, I became aware that the carriage had stopped. We were in a courtyard. Above us, a castle. Vast. Ancient. Its tall black windows giving off no light. Its broken battlements cutting a ragged line against the sky. The moon was out again, cold and white. It showed me stone and shadow and a great arched doorway ahead, and nothing else.
Let that image sit with you. The courtyard. The silence after the carriage stops. The cold. The moonlight on the ancient stone. The driver helps him down, takes the bags, sets them at his feet, and then climbs straight back up. Shakes the reins. And disappears. Just like that. Down one of the dark archways at the side of the courtyard. Gone.
I stood alone. The bags at my feet. The great door before me. There was no bell. No knocker. Nothing to knock on but the door itself, and those walls were so thick and so old that I doubted any sound could penetrate them. I waited. And I waited. Doubts crept up on me in the cold. What sort of place had I come to? Among what kind of people? Was this the ordinary business of a solicitor? Sent out to assist a foreign nobleman with the purchase of a London estate? I thought of Mina. I thought of the old woman at the inn, pressing the crucifix into my hands. For your mother's sake. I was about to give up hope of anyone coming at all when I heard it. A heavy step on the other side of the door. A slow approach. Then, through the gaps in the old wood, a gleam of light. Chains rattled. Great bolts were drawn back one, then another. A key turned a long grinding sound like something unused for years. And the door swung open.
Within stood a tall old man, clean-shaven, save for a long white mustache. Dressed in black from head to foot, not a single speck of color anywhere about him. in his hand an antique silver lamp. The flame burned without chimney or globe, open to the air, throwing long, quivering shadows across the walls as it flickered in the draught from the open door. He motioned with his right hand, a courtly gesture, old-fashioned, like something from a portrait.
He spoke in excellent English, but with a strange intonation, something I could not quite place. Welcome to my house. Enter freely and of your own will. He stood like a statue. He did not step forward. He waited. I crossed the threshold. The moment I was inside, he moved quickly, smoothly, and took my hand in his. The grip made me wince. Not from pain, though there was that. From cold. His hand was as cold as ice. Not cold as someone who has been standing in a winter night. Cold as I could not finish the thought then. I finish it now. Cold as the hand of a dead man. He spoke again. Welcome to my house. Come freely, go safely, and leave something of the happiness you bring. I managed to ask as calmly as I could, Count Dracula? He bowed. I am Dracula, and I bid you welcome, Mr. Harker, to my house. Come in, the night air is chill, and you must need to eat and rest. He set the lamp on a bracket in the wall, stepped outside, and gathered my luggage before I could stop him. I protested. He would not hear it. Nay, sir, you are my guest. It is late, and my people are not available. Let me see to your comfort myself. He carried my bags along a wide stone passage, up a great winding staircase, along another passage where our steps rang hard on the stone floor. At the end of this, he threw open a heavy door, and I felt a wave of warmth. A fire blazing in a great hearth, logs freshly added, burning well. Candles lit. A table set for supper. A proper room. The sight of it, after everything that night, I cannot describe the relief. He showed me through to a bedroom beyond, also warmed by a fire, told me to refresh myself, and then come back to eat. You will need, after your journey, to refresh yourself by making your toilet. I trust you will find all you wish. When you are ready, come into the other room where you will find your supper prepared. He withdrew. He closed the door. I was alone.
The warmth works on you. After cold and dark and fear, warmth is the most overwhelming thing in the world. Let it settle over you now, wherever you are. The fire in the grate, the soft light, the safety of a room with walls.
When I came back to the supper room, he was there, standing at the side of the great fireplace, leaning against the stonework. He made a graceful wave toward the table. I pray you be seated and sup how you please. You will, I trust, excuse me that I do not join you, but I have dined already and I do not sup. Roast chicken, cheese, a salad, and a bottle of old Tokay wine, golden and smooth. The Count stood near the fire through all of it. He did not eat. He did not drink. He watched. He asked me about my journey quietly with genuine interest, it seemed, and I told him everything. The train, the inn, the coach, the past. He listened without interrupting, his pale face still and attentive in the firelight. When I had finished supper, he offered me a cigar and indicated a chair drawn close to the fire. He excused himself that he did not smoke, and for the first time I had the leisure to look at him properly.
There is a quality to certain faces, a quality that is hard to name without sounding dramatic. But it is the quality of great age living inside a form that does not show age in any ordinary way. The face of the Count was remarkable.
A strong face, aquiline, the nose high-bridged and thin, with arched nostrils, a lofty domed forehead, hair growing scantily at the temples but profusely elsewhere. His eyebrows were very massive, almost meeting over the nose. The mouth beneath a heavy mustache was fixed and rather cruel-looking. The teeth were sharp and very white. His lips were unusually red. In a man of clearly great years, quite astonishingly red. His ears were pale and pointed at the top. The chin was broad and firm. The general effect was one of extraordinary pallor, as though the man had not been in sunlight for a very long time. His hands, which I had seen resting on his knees in the firelight, appeared white and fine. But when he leaned forward at one point and I saw them up close, they were different. Coarse, broad, the fingers squat and strong, the nails long and cut to sharp points. And I do not know how to write this without sounding foolish. There was hair in the centers of the palms. When his hand brushed against mine, a shudder went through me that I could not conceal. Whether it was the cold of him or something else, some smell, some quality I could not name, I cannot say. He saw it. He drew back with a grim sort of smile. He sat himself down again on his own side of the fireplace. We were both quiet for a time, and in the silence, from somewhere far below in the valley, very faint, very distant, the howling of wolves again. The Count's eyes gleamed. He turned toward the sound as though it pleased him. Listen to them, the children of the night. What music they make. Something in my face must have shown what I thought of that, for he added, "Ah, sir, you dwellers in the city cannot enter into the feelings of the hunter.
The children of the night." He said it with genuine warmth, as though the wolves were familiar companions, as though their cry in the dark was a thing of pleasure. And I want you to rest with that image for a moment. The firelit room. The two of them in their chairs on opposite sides of the hearth. The young solicitor from London, and the tall, pale man who does not eat, who does not drink, who listens to wolves the way other men listen to music.
The next day I woke late, rested, and in considerably better spirits. The castle looked different in daylight, or rather in the light of candles and firelight, since there did not seem to be any daylight in these rooms. Still no servants. I had found a cold breakfast laid out, which meant someone had prepared it, but I had heard nothing, seen no one. I looked for a bell to ring. There was none. I explored a little. The furnishings were extraordinary fabrics that must have been centuries old and yet in perfect condition. Table service of solid gold. Books everywhere. But no mirrors. Not a single one anywhere in the rooms available to me. Not so much as a shaving glass. I had to use the small one from my own bag to shave by. I found a library. A magnificent library, whole shelves of English books. Histories, geographies, law books, reference volumes, all relating to England. A table covered in English newspapers and magazines. I was still standing there looking at them when the Count came in. He greeted me warmly and said, "I'm glad you found your way in here, for I am sure there is much that will interest you. These companions," and he laid his hand on some of the books, "have been good friends to me, and for some years past, ever since I had the idea of going to London, have given me many, many hours of pleasure. Through them I have come to know your great England, and to know her is to love her. He paused. I long to go through the crowded streets of your mighty London, to be in the midst of the whirl and rush of humanity, to share its life, its change, its death, and all that makes it what it is. But alas, as yet I only know your tongue through books. To you, my friend, I look that I know it to speak. I told him truthfully that his English seemed excellent to me. He bowed, but would not accept the compliment. I thank you, my friend, for your all too flattering estimate, but yet I fear that I am but a little way on the road I would travel. True, I know the grammar and the words, but yet I know not how to speak them. I said that he spoke excellently. Not so, he answered. Well, I know that. Did I move and speak in your London? None there are who would not know me for a stranger. That is not enough for me. He walked a little toward the window, pausing in the shadows there, keeping back from the light. Here I am noble. I am boyar. The common people know me, and I am master. But a stranger in a strange land, he is no one. Men know him not, and to know not is to care not for. I am content if I am like the rest, so that no man stops if he see me, or pause in his speaking if he hear my words. Ha ha, a stranger. He turned back toward the room. I have been so long master that I would be master still, or at least that none other should be master of me. He spoke about England with a curious hunger, a longing that seemed personal and deep and old. He spoke about my employer, Mr. Hawkins, and the new estate near London. He was attentive to every detail. Then he smiled that fixed, careful smile and said, "You may go anywhere you wish in the castle, except where the doors are locked, where of course you will not wish to go. There is reason that all things are as they are, and did you see with my eyes and know with my knowledge, you would perhaps better understand." And then, almost as though he wanted to make sure I understood the weight of what he had said, "We are in Transylvania, and Transylvania is not England. Our ways are not your ways, and there shall be to you many strange things."
And there it is. That is how it begins. A young man, a locked castle, a host who does not eat, who does not drink, who keeps himself in the shadows, whose hand is cold as the grave, whose people are never seen, whose doors are locked, and who tells you with a courtly smile that of course you would not wish to go there. Jonathan Harker writes it all down. Careful, methodical, in his small, precise shorthand. And then he writes this: "I am all in a sea of wonders. I doubt, I fear, I think strange things which I dare not confess to my own soul. God keep me, if only for the sake of those dear to me." Chapter 2. Jonathan Harker's Journal. continued. I read these entries slowly as Jonathan wrote them, not as a story safely finished and behind glass, but as a record still alive with fear. The 7th of May.
It is again early morning, but I have rested and enjoyed the last 24 hours. I slept till late in the day and awoke of my own accord. When I had dressed myself, I went into the room where we had supped and found a cold breakfast laid out, with coffee kept hot by the pot being placed on the hearth. There was a card on the table. On it was written, in that dark, precise hand, "I have to be absent for a while. Do not wait for me. D."
A single letter for a signature. Just a D. Jonathan sat down to his breakfast alone in that vast firelit room, the gold table service gleaming around him, the tapestries breathing softly in some unseen draft.
When I had done, I looked for a bell so that I might let the servants know I had finished. But I could not find one. There are certainly odd deficiencies in the house, considering the extraordinary evidences of wealth which are round me. The table service is of gold, and so beautifully wrought that it must be of immense value. The curtains and upholstery of the chairs and sofas, and the hangings of my bed are of the costliest and most beautiful fabrics, centuries old, though in excellent order. I saw something like them in Hampton Court, but there they were worn and frayed and moth-eaten. But still in none of the rooms is there a mirror. There is not even a toilet glass on my table. I had to get the little shaving glass from my bag before I could either shave or brush my hair. I have not yet seen a servant anywhere or heard a sound near the castle except the howling of wolves.
No mirrors. No servants. Only the wolves, distant and perpetual, like a chorus that never ends. After his late breakfast, Jonathan looked about for something to read. There was absolutely nothing in the dining room, not a book, not a newspaper, not even writing materials. So he opened another door and found himself in a library.
In the library I found, to my great delight, a vast number of English books, whole shelves full of them, and bound volumes of magazines and newspapers. A table in the center was littered with English magazines and newspapers, though none of them were of very recent date. The books were of the most varied kind: history, geography, politics, political economy, botany, geology, law, all relating to England and English life and customs and manners. There were even such books of reference as the London Directory, Whitaker's Almanac, the Army and Navy lists. And it somehow gladdened my heart to see it, the law list.
You can imagine him there. A young solicitor in a strange land, running his finger along row after row of English spines. Every one of them about England. Every map, every directory, every almanac. A library built not for pleasure, but for study, for preparation. He wanted to be invisible, unremarkable, to move through the crowd of London like water moving through water. Something about the way he said it sent a chill through Jonathan that he could not explain. They talked for a long while. The Count asked question after question about England, its roads, its people, its customs, its ports. Then he asked Jonathan to bring out the papers relating to the property he had procured in London.
"Come," he said at last, "tell me of London and of the house which you have procured for me."
Jonathan went to his room for the papers, and when he returned the Count was lying on the sofa, reading, of all things, an English railway timetable. They spread the documents across the table together. The Count studied every detail, the estate at Purfleet, the grounds, the old chapel, the moat, the thick stone walls. He was interested in everything. His dark eyes moved across the pages with a hunger that had nothing to do with property law.
When I remarked that he seemed to know the neighborhood already, he answered, "Well, but my friend, is it not needful that I should? When I go there, I shall be all alone, and my friend Jonathan Harker will not be by my side to correct and aid me. He will be in Exeter, miles away, probably working at papers of the law with my other friend Peter Hawkins.
And so they worked through the evening. Deeds and figures and legal papers spread between them. Two men sitting across a table in a castle at the edge of the world. One of them making careful plans for a future Jonathan was only beginning to dread. Jonathan found an atlas lying open on a side table. It had fallen open naturally at England, as if that page had been turned to many times.
On looking at it, I found in certain places little rings marked. On examining these, I noticed that one was near London on the east side, manifestly where his new estate was situated. The other two were Exeter and Whitby on the Yorkshire coast.
Exeter, where Mina was, where Jonathan himself would go home to if he ever went home. Supper came and went. The Count, as always, did not eat. He sat across the fire and watched Jonathan dine, asking questions, filling the silence with his deep, measured voice. The hours drew on. Well past midnight. Then, toward dawn, Jonathan wrote it down faithfully.
I could not help experiencing that chill which comes over one at the coming of the dawn, which is in its way like the turn of the tide. They say that people who are near death die generally at the change to the dawn or at the turn of the tide. Anyone who has, when tired, experienced this change in the atmosphere can well believe it. All at once we heard the crow of a cock coming up with preternatural shrillness through the clear morning air. Count Dracula, jumping to his feet, said, "Why, there's the morning again. How remiss I am to let you stay up so long. You must make your conversation regarding my dear new country of England less interesting, so that I may not forget how time flies by us." And with a courtly bow, he quickly left me.
The morning again. Always at the crow of the cock, at the first gray touch of dawn, he was gone. Jonathan drew the curtains and sat with his journal. "I am all in a sea of wonders," he wrote. "I doubt, I fear. I think strange things which I dare not confess to my own soul. God keep me. If only for the sake of those dear to me. The 8th of May.
I began to fear as I wrote in this book that I was getting too diffuse, but now I am glad that I went into detail from the first, for there is something so strange about this place and all in it that I cannot but feel uneasy. I wish I were safe out of it, or that I had never come. It may be that this strange night existence is telling on me, but would that were all. If there were anyone to talk to, I could bear it, but there is no one. I have only the Count to speak with, and he. I fear I am myself the only living soul within the place.
The only living soul within the place. He wrote it and then, perhaps, stared at it for a long time. He had slept only a few hours. Feeling he could not sleep any more, he got up early. He hung his small traveling shaving glass by the window, where the light was good. He picked up his razor. He began to shave.
Suddenly I felt a hand on my shoulder and heard the Count's voice saying to me, "Good morning." I started, for it amazed me that I had not seen him, since the reflection of the glass covered the whole room behind me. In starting, I had cut myself slightly, but did not notice it at the moment. Having answered the Count's salutation, I turned to the glass again to see how I had been mistaken. This time there could be no error, for the man was close to me and I could see him over my shoulder. But there was no reflection of him in the mirror. The whole room behind me was displayed, but there was no sign of a man in it except myself.
Breathe. The whole room reflected. The window, the bed, the heavy curtains, the stone walls. Jonathan's own pale face. And behind him, nothing. The Count standing close enough to touch him. And nothing.
This was startling, and coming on the top of so many strange things, was beginning to increase that vague feeling of uneasiness which I always have when the Count is near. But at the instant I saw that the cut had bled a little, and the blood was trickling over my chin, I laid down the razor, turning as I did so half round to look for some sticking plaster. When the Count saw my face, his eyes blazed with a sort of demoniac fury. and he suddenly made a grab at my throat. I drew away, and his hand touched the string of beads which held the crucifix. It made an instant change in him, for the fury passed so quickly that I could hardly believe that it had ever been there.
One moment, red-eyed fury. The next, stillness. A composed, cold face, as if nothing had happened.
"Take care," he said. "Take care how you cut yourself. It is more dangerous than you think in this country." Then, seizing the shaving glass, he went on, "And this is the wretched thing that has done the mischief. It is a foul bauble of man's vanity. Away with it." And opening the heavy window with one wrench of his terrible hand, he flung out the glass, which was shattered into 1,000 pieces on the stones of the courtyard far below. Then he withdrew without a word.
Far below. The glass fell a long way before it struck. Jonathan stood at the window and listened to it shatter, and understood for the first time how high up he was. Now let me tell you about him. About the Count, as Jonathan came to know him in those long, strange evenings by the fire. He was tall. Very tall and thin. Thin in that way that suggests not fragility, but an absence of anything unnecessary. His face was strongly aquiline. A high bridge to the thin nose with peculiarly arched nostrils. A forehead that rose high and domed, the hair growing scantily round the temples but profusely elsewhere, and deeply, darkly dark, with threads of white at the sides. The eyebrows were very massive, almost meeting over the nose, with bushy hair that seemed to curl in its own profusion. The mouth, so far as Jonathan could see it beneath the heavy mustache, was fixed and rather cruel-looking. Peculiarly sharp white teeth. They protruded slightly over the lips, whose remarkable ruddiness showed astonishing vitality in a man of his years. His ears were pale and at the tops extremely pointed. The chin broad and strong. The cheeks firm though thin. The general effect one of extraordinary pallor. And the hands. Jonathan had noticed them at first by firelight, the backs of them, pale and fine-looking as they rested on the Count's knees. But closer, when the Count leaned over him one evening, he saw them clearly. They were broad with squat fingers, coarser than they first appeared, and stranger still, there were hairs in the center of the palms. The nails were long and cut to a sharp point. As the Count leaned closer, close enough that Jonathan could feel the chill that seemed to radiate from him, there was something else. A breath. Rank and cold. A horrible feeling of nausea came over Jonathan, which, do what he would, he could not conceal. The Count noticed. He drew back with that grim, thin smile, the one that showed more than usual of those protuberant teeth, and sat himself down again on his own side of the fireplace. They sat in silence, and from far below in the valley came the sound Jonathan had come to know well. The howling of wolves. The Count's eyes gleamed. Now I must tell you about the great speech. The one Jonathan recorded as faithfully as he could. It came on the night of the 12th of May.
I asked him a few questions on Transylvanian history, and he warmed up to the subject wonderfully. In his speaking of things and people, and especially of battles, he spoke as if he had been present at them all. This he afterwards explained by saying that to a boyar the pride of his house and name is his own pride, that their glory is his glory, that their fate is his fate. Whenever he spoke of his house, he always said we, and spoke almost in the plural, like a king speaking. He grew excited as he spoke, and walked about the room pulling his great white mustache and grasping anything on which he laid his hands as though he would crush it by main strength.
And then he spoke.
We Seklis have a right to be proud, for in our veins flows the blood of many brave races who fought as the lion fights for lordship. Here in the whirlpool of European races, the Ugric tribe bore down from Iceland the fighting spirit which Thor and Woden gave them, which their berserkers displayed to such fell intent on the seaboards of Europe, aye, and of Asia and Africa too, till the peoples thought that the werewolves themselves had come. Here too, when they came, they found the Huns, whose warlike fury had swept the earth like a living flame, till the dying peoples held that in their veins ran the blood of those old witches who, expelled from Scythia, had mated with the devils in the desert. Fools, fools, what devil or what witch was ever so great as Attila, whose blood is in these veins? He held up his arms. Is it a wonder that we were a conquering race, that we were proud, that when the Magyar, the Lombard, the Avar, the Bulgar, or the Turk poured his thousands on our frontiers, we drove them back? Is it strange that when Arpad and his legions swept through the Hungarian fatherland, he found us here when he reached the frontier, that the Onfoglalis was completed there? And when the Hungarian flood swept eastward, the Seklis were claimed as kindred by the victorious Magyars, and to us for centuries was trusted the guarding of the frontier of Turkey land, aye, and more than that, endless duty of the frontier guard, for, as the Turks say, water sleeps and enemy is sleepless. Who more gladly than we throughout the four nations received the bloody sword, or at its warlike call flocked quicker to the standard of the king? When was redeemed that great shame of my nation, the shame of Kosova, when the flags of the Wallach and the Magyar went down beneath the crescent? Who was it but one of my own race who, as voivode, crossed the Danube and beat the Turk on his own ground? This was a Dracula indeed. Woe was it that his own unworthy brother, when he had fallen, sold his people to the Turk and brought the shame of slavery on them. Again, when, after the battle of Mohacs, we threw off the Hungarian yoke, we of the Dracula blood were amongst their leaders, for our spirit would not brook that we were not free. Ah, young sir, the Seklis and the Dracula as their heart's blood, their brains and their swords, can boast a record that mushroom growths like the Habsburgs and the Romanovs can never reach. The warlike days are over. Blood is too precious a thing in these days of dishonorable peace, and the glories of the great races are as a tale that is told.
He stood in the firelight as he said it. That tall, pale figure with his arms raised and his eyes bright. Speaking of centuries of blood as if he had personally bled for every one of them. And Jonathan, watching him, began to understand something he could not yet put into words. That the Count did not speak of his ancestors as dead men. He spoke of them as himself. It was close on morning when they parted. Jonathan sat alone with his journal and wrote something small, almost a joke, as if humor were the last wall he had. He wrote, "This diary seems horribly like the beginning of the Arabian Nights, for everything has to break off at cockcrow. Or like the ghost of Hamlet's father." He wrote it down and then, I think, stopped smiling. The 12th of May.
Let me begin with facts bare, meager facts verified by books and figures and of which there can be no doubt. I must not confuse them with experiences which will have to rest on my own observation or my memory of them. Last evening, when the Count came from his room, he began by asking me questions on legal matters. First, he asked if a man in England might have 2 solicitors or more. I told him he might have a dozen if he wished, but that it would not be wise to have more than one solicitor engaged in one transaction. He seemed thoroughly to understand and went on to ask if there would be any practical difficulty in having one man to attend to banking and another to look after shipping in case local help were needed in a place far from home.
He was planning precisely and carefully, laying his arrangements across the future like a man who expects to have a great deal of time to execute them. Jonathan answered every question as a good solicitor should. And then the Count set aside his papers and placed his hand heavy and cold on Jonathan's shoulder.
Have you written since your first letter to our friend Mr. Peter Hawkins or to any other? It was with some bitterness in my heart that I answered that I had not, that as yet I had not seen any opportunity of sending letters to anybody. Then write now, my young friend, he said. Write to our friend and to any other, and say, if it will please you, that you shall stay with me until a month from now. Do you wish me to stay so long? I asked, for my heart grew cold at the thought. I desire it much. Nay, I will take no refusal. When your master, employer, what you will, engage that someone should come on his behalf, it was understood that my needs only were to be consulted. I have not stinted, is it not so?
What could he do? He was in a castle in the mountains, days from any railway, in a country he did not know. And there was something in the Count's eyes as he spoke, something that went beyond persuasion. Something that told Jonathan, quietly and without ambiguity, that refusal was not truly an option.
I pray you, my good young friend, that you will not discourse of things other than business in your letters. It will doubtless please your friends to know that you are well and that you look forward to getting home to them. Is it not so?" As he spoke, he handed me 3 sheets of notepaper and 3 envelopes. They were all of the thinnest foreign post. And looking at them, then at him, and noticing his quiet smile with the sharp canine teeth lying over the red underlip, I understood as well as if he had spoken. I should be careful what I wrote, for he would be able to read it.
So Jonathan wrote his letters. Short, careful, hollow letters. All is well. I shall be here some weeks longer. Please do not worry. He handed them over. He watched the Count add them to his own correspondence with those pale, deliberate hands. And then the Count paused at the door and looked back.
"Let me advise you, my dear young friend, nay, let me warn you with all seriousness, that should you leave these rooms you will not by any chance go to sleep in any other part of the castle. It is old, and has many memories, and there are bad dreams for those who sleep unwisely. Be warned, should sleep now or ever overcome you, or be like to do, then haste to your own chamber or to these rooms, for your rest will then be safe. But if you be not careful in this respect, then—" He finished his speech in a gruesome way. He motioned with his hands as if he were washing them.
I quite understood. That was what Jonathan wrote. I quite understood. He placed the crucifix above his bed that night. He lay beneath it and stared at the ceiling, and tried to sleep in a castle where he was, he now knew, entirely alone. Alone with something that moved only in the dark. Something that left no reflection in a glass. Something that never ate, never drank, never appeared until after sunset, and recoiled at the touch of a crucifix. The next morning after a breakfast he ate in silence, Jonathan went exploring. He climbed the stone stairs and found a room that looked toward the south.
The view was magnificent, and from where I stood there was every opportunity of seeing it. The castle is on the very edge of a terrible precipice. A stone falling from the window would fall 1,000 feet without touching anything. As far as the eye can reach is a sea of green treetops, with occasionally a deep rift where there is a chasm. Here and there are silver threads where the rivers wind in deep gorges through the forests. But I am not in heart to describe beauty, for when I had seen the view I explored further. Doors, doors, doors everywhere, and all locked and bolted. In no place save from the windows in the castle walls is there an available exit. The castle is a veritable prison, and I am a prisoner.
I am a prisoner." He wrote it plainly without decoration and closed his journal. That beautiful room with its costly hangings and its golden table service. That library full of English books, each one a map of somewhere he could not reach. Those corridors that led to locked door after locked door. That precipice falling away 1,000 feet below the southern window. And somewhere beneath him, in rooms he never saw, a man who kept no reflections, sleeping perhaps through the long, bright hours of the day. Waiting for the dark. What manner of man is this? Jonathan did not write those words in this chapter, but I think he thought them as he set down his pen. What manner of man? What manner of creature in the semblance of man? And the wolves answered him from far below, their voices rising through the forest, through the chasm, up the sheer face of that terrible precipice, to the window where he stood, alone. Chapter 3. Jonathan Harker's journal continued. I want you to settle in now. Let the weight of wherever you are, the chair, the pillow, the floor, let it hold you fully. We are back inside the castle, the same stone walls, the same impossible silence. And Jonathan, our young solicitor from England, so far from everything he knows, is writing again in his journal.
When I found that I was a prisoner, a sort of wild feeling came over me. I rushed up and down the stairs, trying every door, peering out of every window I could find. But after a little while, the conviction of my helplessness overpowered all other feelings. When I look back now, I think I must have been mad for a time. I behaved much as a rat does in a trap. But when the conviction came at last that I truly could not leave, I sat down quietly as I have ever done anything in my life, and I began to think. Of one thing only am I certain. It is no use making my fears known to the Count. He knows I am imprisoned. He has done it himself, and he would only deceive me if I trusted him with the full truth. So far as I can see, my only plan will be to keep my knowledge and my fears to myself, and my eyes open. I am either being deceived like a child by my own imagination, or else I am in desperate straits. If the latter is true, I shall need every faculty I have.
He heard the great door below shut some time later. The Count had returned. Jonathan watched through a crack in the door and saw something he had half suspected but not quite allowed himself to believe. The Count was laying the table himself, making the bed himself. There were no servants. There had never been any servants.
This gave me a fright, for if there is no one else in the castle, it must have been the Count himself who was the driver of the coach that brought me here. This is a terrible thought, for if so, what does it mean that he could control the wolves by only holding up his hand in silence? What meant the giving of the crucifix at Bistritz? The garlic, the wild rose, the mountain ash? Bless that good, good woman who hung the crucifix round my neck. It is a comfort and a strength to me whenever I touch it.
He spent that midnight in long conversation with the Count. Dracula spoke of the history of his land with a fire that was almost frightening, not like a man recounting the past, but like a man who had been present at all of it. He paced the room. He pulled at his great white mustache. He grasped whatever his hand found as if he could crush stone. And then he spoke of his blood, his lineage, his people. It was close on morning when they finally parted. Jonathan went to bed and noted with a dark amusement that this diary was beginning to feel horribly like the Arabian Nights. Everything had to break off at cockcrow.
12 May. Let me begin with facts, bare, meager facts, verified by books and figures and of which there can be no doubt. Last evening, the Count asked me questions on legal matters. He wanted to know whether a man in England might have 2 solicitors or more. He asked about shipping, about banking, about how goods might be consigned to Newcastle, to Harwich, to Dover. His knowledge was extraordinary for a man who had never been to England. His precision was almost frightening. And then, abruptly, he laid a heavy hand on my shoulder and said, "Write to our friend Mr. Hawkins, and to any other. Say, if it please you, that you shall stay with me until a month from now." "Do you wish me to stay so long?" I asked. My heart grew cold at the thought. "I desire it much. Nay, I will take no refusal." What could I do but bow? And as I bowed, he smiled. He handed me paper and envelopes, thin foreign post, and smiled again as he did so, and I understood, looking at his quiet face, that I should be careful what I wrote. He would read every word.
Before he left for the evening, the Count paused at the door, and he gave Jonathan a warning. But Jonathan did not go back to his room, not that night. He went instead to a window on the upper stairs and looked out to the south. The sky was wide and pale. The moonlight fell across the valleys like something poured. And as he leaned out, something caught his eye. A movement, 1 story below and slightly to the left.
What I saw was the Count's head coming out from the window below. I did not see his face, but I knew the man by the neck. By the movement of his back and arms, I could not mistake those hands. I was at first only curious, almost amused. A prisoner finds interest in small things. But my feelings changed to something I cannot easily name. I saw the whole man slowly emerge from the window and begin to crawl down the castle wall. Face down. His cloak spreading out around him like great wings. I thought at first it must be some trick of the moonlight, some strange effect of shadow. I could not believe my eyes. But I kept looking, and it could be no delusion. I saw the fingers and toes grasp the corners of the stones worn clear of the mortar by the stress of years, and by thus using every projection and inequality, he moved downwards with considerable speed. just as a lizard moves along a wall.
I want you to breathe that in slowly. The moonlit wall, the vast dark drop below, and that figure moving down it like something that belongs to the stone itself. We are deep in the story now, but you are safe here. This is only a journal, only words on old paper, and we are reading them together quietly from far away. May 15th. Jonathan watches again from the same window. The Count descends once more face downward, moving sideways 100 feet down and to the left before vanishing into some hollow or window far below. And Jonathan makes a decision. With the Count gone from the castle, he will explore. He will not simply sit in those locked rooms and wait. He takes a lamp. He tries every door on the upper floors, all locked, the locks new and strong. He goes down to the great entrance hall. He can draw the bolts. He can unhook the chains, but the door itself is locked, and the key is gone. The key must be somewhere in the Count's rooms. He searches further. Passages, side stairs, small rooms near the hall open but empty, old furniture heavy with dust. And then, at the top of one stairway, he finds a door that gives a little under pressure, not locked, only stuck, the hinges fallen, the heavy door resting on the stone floor. He forces it back and steps through.
I was now in a wing of the castle further to the right than any rooms I had known, and a story lower. From the windows I could see that the suite of rooms lay along to the south. The end room looked out both west and south, on either side a great precipice. The castle stood on the corner of a great rock, impregnable on three sides. Here, where no sling or arrow could ever reach, the old builders had placed comfort, wide windows, light. This was evidently the portion of the castle occupied by the ladies in bygone days. The furniture had more air of comfort than any I had seen elsewhere. The windows were curtainless. The yellow moonlight flooded in through the diamond panes. Even in the pale light one could see colors, whilst the soft glow disguised in some measure the ravages of time and the dust that lay over everything like a second skin. My lamp seemed almost useless in the brilliant moonlight, but I was glad to have it, for there was a dread loneliness in the place which chilled my heart and made my nerves tremble. Still, it was better than the rooms I had come to hate from the presence of the Count. After a time, I found a soft quietude come over me. Here I am, sitting at a little oak table, where in old times, perhaps, some fair lady sat to write her letters with much thought and many blushes, and I am writing in my diary, in shorthand, all that has happened since I closed it last. It is 19th century up to date with a vengeance. And yet, unless my senses deceive me, the old centuries had and have powers of their own which mere modernity cannot kill.
I want you to picture that room. The moonlight pooling across old floors, furniture draped in decades of quiet dust, curtains gone long ago, but the window frames still carved with care, still holding their diamond panes. A place that was once soft with life, women's voices, candlelight, the small sounds of ordinary evenings. All of it gone now, only the light remaining, and Jonathan with his little lamp sitting at that small oak table. He should have gone back, he knew he should have gone back. But the rooms he had been given felt like a cage, and this abandoned wing felt somehow like a breath of fresh air. The moonlight soothed, the wide view to the south gave a sense of freedom. He put down his pen, he closed his diary, and he drew a great couch out from the corner, uncaring of the dust, and lay down upon it. He could look at the lovely view to east and south as he closed his eyes, the soft light, the far peaks, the silence. He supposed he must have fallen asleep. He hoped so. But even now, writing in the full daylight of the following morning, he cannot in the least believe that what came next was only a dream.
The morning of 16th May. God preserve my sanity, for to this I am reduced. Safety and the assurance of safety are things of the past. Whilst I live on here, there is but one thing to hope for, that I may not go mad, if indeed I am not mad already.
Let me tell you what he wrote. What he remembers of that night, or what he dreamed, or what was done to him while he lay on that old couch in the moonlight. He writes it carefully, in the shorthand only Mina would understand, because he is afraid of what it means.
I was not alone. The room was the same, unchanged in any way since I had come into it. I could see along the floor, in the brilliant moonlight, my own footsteps marked where I had disturbed the long accumulation of dust. But in the moonlight opposite me were 3 young women. Ladies by their dress and manner. I thought at the time that I must be dreaming when I saw them, for though the moonlight was behind them, they threw no shadow on the floor.
No shadow. And yet they were there, perfectly, terribly there.
They came close to me. They looked at me for some time, then whispered together. 2 of them were dark, high aquiline noses, like the Count, great dark piercing eyes that seemed almost red when contrasted with the pale yellow moon. The other was fair, as fair as can be, with great wavy masses of golden hair and eyes like pale sapphires. I seemed somehow to know her face, to know it in connection with some dreamy fear, but I could not recollect in that moment how or where. All 3 had brilliant white teeth that shone like pearls against the ruby of their lips. There was something about them that made me uneasy, some longing, and at the same time some deadly fear. I felt in my heart a wicked, burning desire that they would kiss me with those red lips. It is not good to note this down, lest some day it should meet Mina's eyes and cause her pain, but it is the truth.
He lies very still, not moving, watching them from beneath his eyelashes. The three women whisper together, and then they laugh.
Such a silvery, musical laugh, but as hard as though the sound never could have come through the softness of human lips. It was like the intolerable, tingling sweetness of water glasses played on by a cunning hand.
The fair one shakes her head, a small, coquettish tilt, and the other two urge her forward.
One said, "Go on, you are first and we shall follow. Yours is the right to begin." The other added, "He is young and strong. There are kisses for us all."
And I want you to understand the quality of what happens next. This is not terror, not yet. This is something stranger, something slower, something that moves like honey through warm air. Jonathan lies still. He cannot move, cannot call out. He does not entirely want to. And the fair woman advances.
She advanced and bent over me. I could feel the movement of her breath upon me. Sweet, it was honey sweet, and sent the same tingling through the nerves as her voice. But with a bitter underlying the sweet, a bitter offensiveness, as one smells in blood. I was afraid to raise my eyelids, but looked out under the lashes. She went to her knees and bent over me, simply watching, waiting. There was a deliberate voluptuousness about her which was both thrilling and repulsive. As she arched her neck, she licked her lips like an animal. I could see in the moonlight the moisture shining on the scarlet lips and on the red tongue as it lapped the white sharp teeth. Lower and lower went her head. Her lips moved below the range of my mouth, below my chin, and seemed about to fasten on my throat. She paused. I could hear the soft, churning sound of her tongue as it moved. I could feel the hot breath on my neck. Then the skin of my throat began to tingle, as one's flesh does when the hand that is to tickle it approaches nearer, nearer. I could feel the soft, shivering touch of the lips on the supersensitive skin of my throat, and the hard dents of two sharp teeth. Just touching, just pausing there. I closed my eyes in a languorous ecstasy and waited. Waited with beating heart.
Gasp! Something cuts through, like lightning. Not from outside, but from within the room. A presence. A force. And Jonathan's eyes open involuntarily.
I was conscious of the presence of the Count, and of his being as if lapped in a storm of fury. As my eyes opened, I saw his strong hand grasp the slender neck of the fair woman and with a giant's power, draw her back. Her blue eyes were transformed with fury. Her white teeth champed with rage. Her fair cheeks blazed red with passion. But the Count. Never did I imagine such wrath and fury, even to the demons of the pit. His eyes were positively blazing. The red light in them was lurid, as if the flames of hellfire blazed behind them. His face was deathly pale. The lines of it were hard like drawn wires. The thick eyebrows that met over his nose now seemed like a heaving bar of white-hot metal. With a fierce sweep of his arm, he hurled the woman from him, then motioned to the others the same imperious gesture I had seen used upon the wolves. And in a voice which, though low and almost a whisper, seemed to cut through the air and ring round the room, he said, "How dare you touch him, any of you? How dare you cast eyes on him when I had forbidden it? Back, I tell you all. This man belongs to me. Beware how you meddle with him, or you'll have to deal with me."
The fair woman, thrown back, tilts her head, and with a laugh of pure, careless defiance, she answers him.
"You yourself never loved. You never loved."
The other two take up the laugh, mirthless, hard, without a soul in it. It rings through the room like something made of iron. Jonathan nearly faints from the sound alone. And then the Count turns, looks at Jonathan's face attentively, and his voice drops to something almost soft.
"Yes, I too can love. You yourselves can tell it from the past. Is it not so? Well now, I promise you that when I am done with him, you shall kiss him at your will. Now go, go, I must awaken him, for there is work to be done."
And then one of the dark women looks down at something on the floor, something the Count has brought with him.
"Are we to have nothing tonight?" said one, with a low laugh as she pointed to the bag which he had thrown upon the floor, which moved, as though there were some living thing within it.
The Count nods. One of the women jumps forward and opens the bag. And from somewhere from inside it comes a sound. A gasp, a low wail, as of a half-smothered child.
The women closed round. I was aghast with horror. But as I looked, they disappeared, and with them the dreadful bag. There was no door near them. They could not have passed me without my noticing. They simply seemed to fade into the rays of the moonlight and pass out through the window. For a moment I could see outside the dim, shadowy forms. And then they were gone entirely.
And from far below, through the stone and the night air in the distance, the sound of a woman screaming. Not a dream scream, not a vague, fading thing, but the real sound of a real mother. And then the wolves answering. And then nothing. Silence.
Then the horror overcame me, and I sank down unconscious.
Let the silence be there for a moment. You can breathe now. The worst of that scene has passed. We are moving forward into the morning.
I awoke in my own bed. If it be that I had not dreamt, the Count must have carried me here. I tried to satisfy myself on the subject, but could not arrive at any unquestionable result. There were certain small evidences. My clothes were folded and laid by in a manner which was not my habit. My watch was still unwound, and I am rigorously accustomed to wind it last thing before sleeping. But these things are no proof. They may only mean that my mind was not as usual. I must watch for proof. Of one thing I am glad. If it was the Count who carried me here, he must have been hurried, for my pockets are intact. He would certainly have taken this diary had he found it. He would have destroyed it. As I look around this room, although it has been to me so full of fear, it is now a sort of sanctuary. For nothing can be more dreadful than those awful women who are waiting.
He reaches up to his throat. 2 small marks, barely visible, a little tender to the touch. He does not write about them directly. He writes around them, in the careful way of a man who knows that the thing he fears most is the thing he can least afford to name.
18 May. I have been down to look at that room again in daylight. I must know the truth. When I got to the doorway at the top of the stairs, I found it closed. It had been so forcibly driven against the jamb that part of the woodwork was splintered. I could see that the bolt of the lock had not been shot, but the door is fastened from the inside. I fear it was no dream, and must act on this surmise.
He goes back to the rooms he is permitted. He goes back to his window. He watches the mountains. He reads. He thinks. And now we come to what Jonathan discovers when he is finally brave enough to explore further on the next occasion the Count leaves the castle. Because Jonathan is a careful man, a methodical man, and he has noticed something. Something that had been tugging at the edge of his thoughts since the morning he stood at his shaving glass and saw a room full of nothing. And now, with the Count gone from the castle again, Jonathan looks more carefully at the rooms around him. At what is there and what is not.
There are no looking glasses anywhere in the castle. I had not quite noticed it before, or rather I had noticed it but not yet registered what it meant. No mirrors, no polished surfaces intended for reflection, none. The shaving glass I had brought myself, and that he destroyed. With his bare hand, he opened the window and threw it down into the courtyard 1,000 feet below, shattered into 1,000 pieces. He called it a foul bauble of man's vanity. But I begin to think there was rather more to it than that.
There are rooms in this castle that can only be reached from outside. Jonathan has worked this out. Rooms whose doors are locked, but whose windows the Count has been seen to enter and exit by crawling down the sheer face of the wall. What is inside those rooms? What does the Count keep there? What does he do in the deep hours when Jonathan lies awake and listens to the silence? He does not know yet. But the questions pile up like stones, each one heavier than the last.
What manner of man is this? Or what manner of creature, in the semblance of man? I feel the dread of this horrible place overpowering me. I am in fear, in awful fear, and there is no escape for me. I am encompassed about with terrors that I dare not think of.
That is where Jonathan leaves us tonight. In that room, at that window, with the mountains stretching away into a darkness that goes on and on. He is still writing, still thinking, still holding himself together with a methodical, careful hand. Still writing things down so that the act of writing might keep him sane. We will leave him there for now, with his little lamp and his careful shorthand and his crucifix hung above the bed. You don't have to carry any of this with you tonight. Leave it here. Leave it in the journal. Leave it in the cold stone rooms of that Transylvanian castle so far from anywhere you will ever go. You are somewhere warm and safe. The night outside is just the ordinary night. And you can let your mind go quiet now. Slowly quiet. All the way quiet. Chapter 4. Jonathan Harker's journal. Continued. I want to read you this chapter slowly, because something shifts in it. In the earlier entries, there was still the ghost of a possibility that some of this might be explained away. That Jonathan might be tired or unwell, or misreading the strangeness around him. That possibility is gone now. What remains is a young man alone in a castle, writing in a diary he knows may never be found, trying to hold on to his reason and to the name of the woman he loves. I'll read it as he wrote it. He does not write their names. He can barely bring himself to name what they are. He simply records the facts as best he can with the neat, lawyerly hand of a young solicitor's clerk who is trained to be precise, who is doing everything he can to stay precise, even now.
The 18th of May. I have been down to look at that room again in daylight, for I must know the truth. When I got to the doorway at the top of the stairs, I found it closed. It had been so forcibly driven against the jamb that part of the woodwork was splintered. The bolt of the lock had not been shot, but the doors fastened from the inside. I fear it was no dream. I must act on this surmise.
And then the 19th of May. This is the entry I want you to listen to with particular care.
I am surely in the toils. Last night the Count asked me in the suavest tones to write 3 letters. One saying that my work here was nearly done, and that I should start for home within a few days. Another saying that I was starting on the very next morning. And the third that I had left the castle and arrived safely at Bistritz. I would fain have rebelled, but I felt that in the present state of things it would be madness to quarrel openly with the Count whilst I am so absolutely in his power. And to refuse would be to excite his suspicion and to arouse his anger. He knows that I know too much, and that I must not live, lest I be dangerous to him. My only chance is to prolong my opportunities. Something may occur which will give me a chance to escape. I saw in his eyes something of that gathering wrath, the same wrath that was manifest when he hurled that fair woman from him. He explained to me that posts were few and uncertain, and that my writing now would ensure ease of mind to my friends. He assured me with such impressiveness that he would countermand the later letters that to oppose him would have been to create new suspicion. I therefore pretended to fall in with his views, and asked him what dates I should put on the letters. He calculated a minute and then said, "The first should be the 12th of June, the second the 19th, and the third the 29th. I know now the span of my life. God help me.
Three letters. 3 dates. A careful, deliberate calendar counting down to the end of a man. Jonathan sat at that desk in a room high above the dark forest, and he wrote the words the Count needed him to write. He dated the first letter the 12th of June. He wrote it in a steady hand. He sealed it. And he understood as he sealed it that he had just helped to arrange his own disappearance from the world. But he was not finished fighting. A few days later, when a band of Zhgani gypsies arrived and made camp in the courtyard of the castle, Jonathan saw what he thought might be a chance.
The 28th of May. There is a chance of escape, or at any rate, of being able to send word home. A band of Zhgani have come to the castle and are encamped in the courtyard. They are fearless and outside all law. They attach themselves to some great noble and call themselves by his name. I shall write letters home and try to get them posted. I have already spoken to them through my window to begin some acquaintanceship. They took their hats off and made signs and obeisance which I could not understand. I have written the letters. Mina's is in shorthand. I have explained my situation to her, but without the horrors which I may only surmise. It would shock and frighten her to death were I to expose my heart fully to her. I have given them to the man below, threw them through the bars of my window with a gold piece, and made what signs I could to have them posted. The man who took them pressed them to his heart and bowed and put them in his cap. I could do no more.
He waited. He sat in the library and read. And then the Count came.
The Count sat down beside me and said in his smoothest voice as he opened 2 letters, "The Shgani has given me these, of which though I know not whence they come, I shall of course take care. See, one is from you to my friend Peter Hawkins. The other..."
He caught sight of the strange symbols as he opened the envelope. The shorthand. The dark look came into his face, and his eyes blazed wickedly.
The other is a vile thing, an outrage upon friendship and hospitality. It is not signed. Well, so it cannot matter to us.
And he held letter and envelope in the flame of the lamp until they were consumed. Then he continued, perfectly calm.
The letter to Hawkins that I shall of course send on, since it is yours. Your letters are sacred to me. Your pardon, my friend, that unknowingly I did break the seal. Will you not cover it again?
He held out the letter. With a courteous bow, he handed Jonathan a clean envelope. Jonathan could only redirect it and hand it back to him in silence. When the Count went out, Jonathan heard the key turn softly in the lock. A minute later, he went and tried the door. It was locked. Despair, Jonathan writes, has its own calms. He slept that night without dreaming. On the 31st of May, he woke and went to his bag for paper and envelopes, thinking he might hide them on his person for some future chance.
Again a surprise. Again a shock. Every scrap of paper was gone, and with it all my notes, my memoranda relating to railways and travel, my letter of credit, in fact, all that might be useful to me were I once outside the castle. The suit in which I had traveled was gone. My overcoat. I could find no trace of them anywhere. This looked like some new scheme of villainy.
He was being stripped. Everything that might mark him as a person in the world, a traveler, a solicitor's clerk, a young man with a home and a name, was being quietly removed. Paper. Clothes. Identity. And then, on the 17th of June, something new arrived at the castle.
This morning, as I was sitting on the edge of my bed, I heard without a cracking of whips and pounding and scraping of horses' feet up the rocky path beyond the courtyard. With joy, I hurried to the window and saw drive into the yard 2 great wagons, each drawn by 8 sturdy horses. I ran to the door, intending to descend and try and join them through the main hall. Again, a shock. My door was fastened on the outside. Then I ran to the window and cried to them. They looked up at me stupidly and pointed. But just then the hetman of the Scani came out, and seeing them pointing to my window said something at which they laughed. Henceforth no effort of mine, no piteous cry or agonized entreaty would make them even look at me. They resolutely turned away. The wagons contained great square boxes with handles of thick rope. These were evidently empty by the ease with which the men handled them, and by their resonance as they were roughly moved. When all were unloaded and piled in one corner of the yard, the Slovaks were given some money by the Scani, and spitting on it for luck, went each to his horse's head. Shortly after, I heard the cracking of their whips die away in the distance.
"50 boxes, each packed with the old earth of the castle's ruined chapel. Jonathan did not yet know what they were for. He would soon understand. In the nights that followed, he watched from the window, and one night, the 24th of June, he saw something extraordinary.
Last night the Count left me early and locked himself into his own room. As soon as I dared, I ran up the winding stair and looked out of the south window. I thought I would watch for the Count, for there is something going on. The Scani are quartered somewhere in the castle and are doing work of some kind. Now and then I hear a far-away muffled sound as of mattock and spade. I had been at the window somewhat less than half an hour when I saw something coming out of the Count's window. I drew back and watched carefully, and saw the whole man emerge. It was a new shock to find that he had on the suit of clothes which I had worn whilst traveling here, and slung over his shoulder the terrible bag which I had seen the women take away. There could be no doubt as to his quest, and in my garb too. This, then, is his new scheme of evil, that he will allow others to see me as they think, so that he may leave evidence I have been seen in the towns posting my own letters, and that any wickedness which he may do shall by the local people be attributed to me. It makes me rage to think that this can go on whilst I am shut up here, a veritable prisoner without even that protection of the law which is a criminal's right and consolation.
He watched. He waited. And as the moonlight fell through the window and the night deepened around him, something strange began to happen.
I began to notice that there were some quaint little specks floating in the rays of the moonlight. They were like the tiniest grains of dust, and they whirled round and gathered in clusters in a nebulous sort of way. I watched them with a sense of soothing, and a sort of calm stole over me. I leaned back in the embrasure in a more comfortable position so that I could enjoy more fully their aerial gamboling. Something made me start up. A low, piteous howling of dogs somewhere far below in the valley. Louder it seemed to ring in my ears, and the floating motes of dust to take new shapes to the sound as they danced in the moonlight. I felt myself struggling to wake to some call of my instincts, nay, my very soul was struggling. I was becoming hypnotized. Quicker and quicker danced the dust. The moonbeams seemed to quiver as they went by me into the mass of gloom beyond. More and more they gathered till they seemed to take dim, phantom shapes. And then I started broad awake and ran screaming from the place. The phantom shapes, which were becoming gradually materialized from the moonbeams, were those of the three ghostly women to whom I was doomed.
He fled back to his own room, where there was no moonlight, and the lamp was burning brightly. He sat. And then, from the Count's room, a sound, something like a sharp wail, quickly suppressed, and then silence. Deep, awful silence.
With a beating heart, I tried my door. But I was locked in my prison and could do nothing. I sat down and simply cried.
And then, below the window, a cry.
As I sat, I heard a sound in the courtyard without, the agonized cry of a woman. I rushed to the window and, throwing it up, peered out between the bars. There indeed was a woman with disheveled hair, holding her hands over her heart as one distressed with running. She was leaning against a corner of the gateway. When she saw my face at the window, she threw herself forward and shouted in a voice laden with menace, "Monster, give me my child." She threw herself on her knees and, raising up her hands, cried the same words and tones which wrung my heart. Then she tore her hair and beat her breast and abandoned herself to all the violences of extravagant emotion. Finally, she threw herself forward, and though I could not see her, I could hear the beating of her naked hands against the door.
Somewhere high overhead, probably on the tower, the voice of the Count, calling, in his harsh metallic whisper.
His call seemed to be answered from far and wide by the howling of wolves. Before many minutes had passed, a pack of them poured like a pent-up dam when liberated through the wide entrance into the courtyard. There was no cry from the woman, and the howling of the wolves was but short. Before long, they streamed away singly, licking their lips. I could not pity her, for I knew now what had become of her child, and she was better dead.
He writes it plainly, without melodrama, because he is a man who has learned that some horrors are too large for melodrama. She was better dead. He writes those words, and then he writes 4 more.
What shall I do? What can I do? How can I escape from this dreadful thing of night and gloom and fear?
The 25th of June. Morning.
No man knows till he has suffered from the night how sweet and how dear to his heart and eye the morning can be. When the sun grew so high this morning that it struck the top of the great gateway opposite my window, the high spot which it touched seemed to me as if the dove from the ark had lighted there. My fear fell from me as if it had been a vaporous garment which dissolved in the warmth. I must take action of some sort whilst the courage of the day is upon me. It has always been at night time that I have been molested or threatened in some way in danger or in fear. I have not yet seen the Count in the daylight. Can it be that he sleeps when others wake, that he may be awake whilst they sleep? If I could only get into his room. But there is no possible way. The door is always locked. No way for me. Yes. There is a way. If one dares to take it. Where his body has gone, why may not another body go? I have seen him myself crawl from his window. Why should not I imitate him? The chances are desperate. But my need is more desperate still. I shall risk it. At the worst, it can only be death. And a man's death is not a calf's. Goodbye, Mina, if I fail. Goodbye, all, and last of all, Mina.
The same day. Later. He made the climb. Along the narrow ledge of stone that runs around the outside of the castle wall, without his boots, fingers in the gaps where the old mortar had long since washed away. He did not look down. He kept his eyes on the wall in front of him, and he moved, hand by hand, foot by foot, toward the Count's window. He reached it. He slid himself inside. The room was empty.
It was barely furnished with odd things which seemed never to have been used. The furniture was covered with dust. I looked for a key, but it was not in the lock, and I could not find it anywhere. The only thing I found was a great heap of gold in one corner, gold of all kinds, Roman and British and Austrian and Hungarian and Greek and Turkish, covered with a film of dust, as though it had lain long in the ground. None of it that I noticed was less than 300 years old. At one corner of the room was a heavy door. I tried it, and it was open. It led through a stone passage to a circular stairway which went steeply down. I descended, minding carefully where I went, for the stairs were dark, being only lit by loopholes in the heavy masonry. At the bottom there was a dark, tunnel-like passage, through which came a deathly, sickly odor. The odor of old earth newly turned. As I went through the passage, the smell grew closer and heavier. At last, I pulled open a heavy door which stood ajar, and found myself in an old, ruined chapel.
An old chapel. The roof was broken. In two places, steps led down to vaults. The ground had recently been dug over, and the earth placed in the great wooden boxes, manifestly the same boxes that had been brought by the Slovaks. Jonathan searched every inch of the ground. There was no further outlet. Then he went down into the vaults.
Into two of them I went, but saw nothing except fragments of old coffins and piles of dust. In the third, however, I made a discovery. There, in one of the great boxes, of which there were 50 in all, on a pile of newly dug earth, lay the Count. He was either dead or asleep. I could not say which. For the eyes were open and stony, but without the glassiness of death. The cheeks had the warmth of life through all their pallor. The lips were as red as ever. But there was no sign of movement, no pulse, no breath, no beating of the heart. I bent over him and tried to find any sign of life. In vain. I thought he might have the keys on him, but when I went to search, I saw the dead eyes. and in them dead though they were, such a look of hate. Though unconscious of me or my presence, that I fled from the place.
He climbed back out, hand by hand, up the wall again, back into his room. He lay on the bed and tried to think. Several days passed. He writes little in them. He reads in the library. He watches the courtyard. He finds in the library a bundle of old letters. Letters from other men. Men who had stayed at Castle Dracula before him. All of them written in the same reassuring tone. All of them saying they were well, that they were about to depart, that their work was nearly finished, that they would be home soon. None of them had come home. The 29th of June arrived. The date of the last letter.
Today is the date of my last letter, and the Count has taken steps to prove that it was genuine, for again I saw him leave the castle by the same window and in my clothes. As he went down the wall, lizard fashion, I wished I had a gun or some lethal weapon that I might destroy him. But I fear that no weapon wrought alone by man's hand would have any effect on him. I dared not wait to see him return, for I feared to see those weird sisters. I came back to the library and read there till I fell asleep. I was awakened by the Count, who looked at me as grimly as a man can look as he said, "Tomorrow, my friend, we must part. You return to your beautiful England. I to some work which may have such an end that we may never meet. Your letter home has been dispatched. Tomorrow I shall not be here, but all shall be ready for your journey. In the morning come the Scani, who have some labors of their own here, and also come some Slovaks. When they have gone, my carriage shall come for you, and shall bear you to the Borgo Pass to meet the diligence to Bistritz. But I am in hopes that I shall see more of you at Castle Dracula. I suspected him and determined to test his sincerity. Sincerity. It seems like a profanation of the word to write it in connection with such a monster. So I asked him point blank, "Why may I not go tonight?" "Because, dear sir, my coachman and horses are away on a mission." "But I would walk with pleasure. I want to get away at once."
He smiled. A soft, smooth, diabolical smile.
"And your baggage?" "I do not care about it. I can send for it some other time."
The Count stood up. with a sweet courtesy which seemed almost real.
You English have a saying which is close to my heart, for its spirit is that which rules our boyars. Welcome the coming, speed the parting guest. Come with me, my dear young friend. Not an hour shall you wait in my house against your will, though sad am I at your going, and that you so suddenly desire it. Come.
With a stately gravity, the Count preceded him down the stairs and along the hall, lamp in hand. Then he stopped.
Hark!
Close at hand, the howling of wolves. It was almost as if the sound sprang up at the rising of his hand, just as the music of a great orchestra seems to leap under the baton of the conductor. After a pause, he proceeded to the front door, drew back the ponderous bolts, unhooked the heavy chains, and began to draw it open.
To my intense astonishment, I saw that it was unlocked. I looked all round, but could see no key of any kind. As the door began to open, the howling of the wolves without grew louder and angrier. Their red jaws, their champing teeth, their blunt clawed feet as they leaped, came in through the opening door. I knew then that to struggle at this moment against the Count was useless. With such allies as these at his command, I could do nothing. But still the door continued slowly to open, and only the Count's body stood in the gap. Suddenly it struck me this might be the moment and means of my doom. I was to be given to the wolves at my own instigation. As a last chance, I cried out, "Shut the door. I shall wait till morning."
And I covered my face with my hands to hide my tears of bitter disappointment. With one sweep of his powerful arm, the Count threw the door shut, and the great bolts clanged and echoed through the hall as they shot back into their places. In silence, they returned to the library, and after a minute or two, Jonathan went to his own room.
The last I saw of Count Dracula was his kissing his hand to me, with a red light of triumph in his eyes and with a smile that Judas in hell might be proud of.
That night late, Jonathan heard a whispering at his door.
Unless my ears deceived me, I heard the voice of the Count. Back, back to your own place. Your time is not yet come. Wait. Have patience. Tonight is mine. Tomorrow night is yours. There was a low, sweet ripple of laughter, and in a rage I threw open the door, and saw without the 3 terrible women licking their lips. As I appeared, they all joined in a horrible laugh and ran away. I came back to my room and threw myself on my knees. Is it then so near the end? Tomorrow. Tomorrow. Lord, help me and those to whom I am dear.
June 30th of morning. He writes, "These may be the last words I ever write in this diary.
I slept till just before the dawn. When I woke, I threw myself on my knees, for I determined that if death came, he should find me ready. At last I felt that subtle change in the air and knew that the morning had come. Then came the welcome cock crow, and I felt that I was safe. With a glad heart, I opened my door and ran down to the hall. I had seen that the door was unlocked, and now escape was before me. With hands that trembled with eagerness, I unhooked the chains and drew back the massive bolts. But the door would not move. Despair seized me. I pulled and pulled at the door and shook it till, massive as it was, it rattled in its casement. I could see the bolt shot. It had been locked after I had left the Count.
He did not hesitate. He went back to the east window, and he climbed down the wall again into the Count's room. It was empty. He passed through the door in the corner, down the winding stair, along the dark passage, toward the smell of old earth. He knew now well enough where to find the monster he sought.
The great box was in the same place, close against the wall. But the lid was laid on it, not fastened down, but with the nails ready in their places to be hammered home. I knew I must reach the body for the key. So I raised the lid and laid it back against the wall. And then I saw something which filled my very soul with horror. There lay the Count, but looking as if his youth had been half renewed. The white hair and mustache were changed to dark iron gray. The cheeks were fuller. The white skin seemed ruby red underneath. The mouth was redder than ever, for on the lips were gouts of fresh blood, which trickled from the corners of the mouth and ran over the chin and neck. Even the deep, burning eyes seemed set amongst swollen flesh, for the lids and pouches underneath were bloated. It seemed as if the whole awful creature were simply gorged with blood. He lay like a filthy leech, exhausted with his repletion. I shuddered as I bent over to touch him, and every sense in me revolted at the contact. But I had to search, or I was lost. The coming night might see my own body a banquet in a similar way to those horrid three. I felt all over the body. No sign could I find of the key. Then I stopped and looked at the Count. There was a mocking smile on the bloated face which seemed to drive me mad. This was the being I was helping to transfer to London, where perhaps for centuries to come he might, amongst its teeming millions, satiate his lust for blood and create a new and ever-widening circle of semi-demons to batten on the helpless. The very thought drove me mad. A terrible desire came upon me to rid the world of such a monster. There was no lethal weapon at hand, but I seized a shovel which the workmen had been using to fill the cases, and lifting it high, struck, with the edge downward, at the hateful face. But as I did so, the head turned, and the eyes fell full upon me. With all their blaze of basilisk horror,
The sight paralyzed him. The shovel turned in his hand and glanced from the face, merely making a deep gash above the forehead. The shovel fell, and as he pulled it away, the lid fell back over the box, hiding the horrid thing from his sight. The last glimpse he had was of the bloated face, blood-stained and fixed with a grin of malice which would have held its own in the nethermost hell. He waited, his brain on fire, a despairing feeling growing over him. And then, in the distance, a gypsy song, sung by merry voices coming closer. And through their song, the rolling of heavy wheels, the cracking of whips, the Shgani and the Slovaks, they were coming.
with a last look around and at the box which contained the vile body, I ran from the place and gained the Count's room, determined to rush out the moment the door should be opened. With strained ears I listened, and heard downstairs the grinding of the key in the great lock and the falling back of the heavy door. Then came the sound of many feet, tramping and dying away in some passage. I turned to run down again toward the vault, where I might find the new entrance. But at that moment there seemed to come a violent puff of wind, and the door to the winding stair blew shut with a shock that set the dust from the lintels flying. When I ran to push it open, I found it hopelessly fast. I was again a prisoner. and the net of doom was closing round me more closely.
He could only listen.
As I write, there is in the passage below a sound of many tramping feet and the crash of weights being set down heavily. Doubtless the boxes with their freight of earth. There is a sound of hammering. It is the box being nailed down. Now I can hear the heavy feet tramping again along the hall, with many other idle feet coming behind them. The door is shut. The chains rattle. There is a grinding of the key in the lock. I can hear the key withdraw. Then another door opens and shuts. I hear the creaking of lock and bolt. Hark! In the courtyard and down the rocky way, the roll of heavy wheels, the crack of whips, and the chorus of the scani as they pass into the distance. I am alone in the castle with those awful women. Mina is a woman, and there is naught in common. They are devils of the pit. I shall not remain alone with them. I shall try to scale the castle wall farther than I have yet attempted. I shall take some of the gold with me, lest I want it later. I may find a way from this dreadful place, and then a way for home, a way to the quickest and nearest train, away from this cursed spot, from this cursed land, where the devil and his children still walk with earthly feet. At least God's mercy is better than that of these monsters. And the precipice is steep and high. At its foot a man may sleep. As a man, goodbye all. Mina.
That is where the journal stops. A young man with a name, Jonathan Harker, solicitor's clerk, soon to be married, who wound his watch every night before bed. Writing his last entry in a castle above a precipice at the edge of the known world. Choosing the cliff over what waits inside. Choosing to sleep as a man. Chapter 5. We leave the castle now. We leave Transylvania and the cold and the dark. And we find ourselves in England. The air is different here. Warmer. There are no stone corridors, no locked doors, no sense of dread pressing in at the edges. There is only the creak of a writing desk, the scratch of a pen, two young women writing letters to each other. I want you to feel that shift, to breathe it in. This chapter belongs to them. The first letter is from Mina Murray. She writes to her dearest friend Lucy Westenra. It is the 9th of May.
My dearest Lucy, forgive my long delay in writing, but I have been simply overwhelmed with work. The life of an assistant schoolmistress is sometimes trying. I am longing to be with you and by the sea, where we can talk together freely and build our castles in the air. I have been working very hard lately because I want to keep up with Jonathan's studies. I have been practicing shorthand very assiduously. When we are married, I shall be able to be useful to Jonathan. If I can stenograph well enough, I can take down what he wants to say and write it out for him on the typewriter, at which also I am practicing very hard. He and I sometimes write letters in shorthand, and he is keeping a stenographic journal of his travels abroad. When I am with you, I shall keep a diary in the same way. I don't mean one of those 2 pages to the week with Sunday squeezed in a corner diaries, but a sort of journal which I can write in whenever I feel inclined. I do not suppose there will be much of interest to other people, but it is not intended for them. I shall try to do what I see lady journalists do, interviewing and writing descriptions and trying to remember conversations. I am told that, with a little practice, one can remember all that goes on or that one hears said during a day. However, we shall see. I have just had a few hurried lines from Jonathan from Transylvania. He is well and will be returning in about a week. I am longing to hear all his news. It must be so nice to see strange countries. I wonder if Jonathan and I shall ever see them together. There's the 10 o'clock bell ringing. Goodbye. Your loving Mina. P.S. Tell me all the news when you write. You have not told me anything for a long time. I hear rumors, and especially of a tall, handsome, curly-haired man.
That is Mina, you see. Practical, warm, devoted. She is studying shorthand so she can be useful to the man she loves. She is working and waiting and making plans. And she cannot resist slipping in that little postscript. Because she is curious. Because she is her friend. Lucy replies from Chatham Street. The date is a Wednesday.
My dearest Mina, I must say you tax me very unfairly with being a bad correspondent. I wrote to you twice since we parted, and your last letter was only your second. Besides, I have nothing to tell you. There is really nothing to interest you. Town is very pleasant just now, and we go a good deal to picture galleries and for walks and rides in the park. As to the tall, curly-haired man, I suppose it was the one who was with me at the last concert. Someone has evidently been telling tales. That was Mr. Holmwood. He often comes to see us, and he and Mama get on very well together. We met some time ago a man that would just do for you, if you are not already engaged to Jonathan. He is an excellent match, being handsome, well off, and of good birth. He is a doctor and really clever. Just fancy, he is only 29, and he has an immense lunatic asylum all under his own care. Mr. Holmwood introduced him to me, and he called here to see us, and often comes now. I think he is one of the most resolute men I ever saw, and yet the most calm. He seems absolutely imperturbable. I can fancy what a wonderful power he must have over his patients. He has a curious habit of looking one straight in the face, as if trying to read one's thoughts. He tries this on very much with me, but I flatter myself he has got a tough nut to crack. I know that from my glass. Do you ever try to read your own face? I do, and I can tell you it is not a bad study. Mina, we have told all our secrets to each other since we were children. We have slept together and eaten together and laughed and cried together. And now, though I have spoken, I would like to speak more. Oh, Mina, couldn't you guess? I love him. I am blushing as I write, for although I think he loves me, he has not told me so in words. But oh, Mina, I love him. I love him. I love him. There, that does me good. I wish I were with you, dear, sitting by the fire undressing, as we used to sit, and I would try to tell you what I feel. I do not know how I am writing this even to you. I am afraid to stop, or I should tear up the letter. And I don't want to stop, for I do so want to tell you all. Let me hear from you at once, and tell me all that you think about it. Mina, I must stop. Good night. Bless me in your prayers, and Mina, pray for my happiness. Lucy. P.S. I need not tell you this is a secret. Good night again.
Arthur Holmwood. That is the name she cannot quite say yet. The tall, curly-haired man who comes to call. And Lucy, bright and young and full of summer, is keeping the secret close, but not very well. Then comes the letter you have been waiting for. Lucy writes again to Mina. The date is the 24th of May.
My dearest Mina, thanks and thanks and thanks again for your sweet letter. It was so nice to be able to tell you and to have your sympathy. My dear, it never rains, but it pours. How true the old proverbs are. Here am I, who shall be 20 in September, and yet I never had a proposal till today. Not a real proposal. And today I have had 3. Just fancy. 3 proposals in one day. Isn't it awful? I feel sorry, really and truly sorry, for 2 of the poor fellows. Oh, Mina, I am so happy that I don't know what to do with myself. But for goodness sake, don't tell any of the girls. Well, I must tell you about the 3, but you must keep it a secret, dear, from everyone. A woman ought to tell her husband everything. Don't you think so, dear? Well, my dear, number 1 came just before lunch. I told you of him, Dr. John Seward. The lunatic asylum man with the strong jaw and the good forehead. He was very cool outwardly, but was nervous all the same. He had evidently been schooling himself as to all sorts of little things, and remembered them. But he almost managed to sit down on his silk hat, which men don't generally do when they are cool. And then, when he wanted to appear at ease, he kept playing with a lancet in a way that made me nearly scream. He spoke to me, Mina, very straightforwardly. He told me how dear I was to him, though he had known me so little, and what his life would be with me to help and cheer him. He was going to tell me how unhappy he would be if I did not care for him, but when he saw me cry, he said that he was a brute and would not add to my present trouble. Then he broke off and asked if I could love him in time. And when I shook my head, his hands trembled. And then, with some hesitation, he asked me if I cared already for anyone else. He put it very nicely, saying that he did not want to wring my confidence from me, but only to know, because if a woman's heart was free, a man might have hope. And then Mina, I felt a sort of duty to tell him that there was someone. I only told him that much. And then he stood up, and he looked very strong and very grave as he took both my hands in his. And he said he hoped I would be happy, and that if I ever wanted a friend, I must count him one of my best. Oh, Mina dear, I can't help crying. And you must excuse this letter being all blotted. Being proposed to is all very nice and all that sort of thing, but it isn't at all a happy thing when you have to see a poor fellow whom you know loves you honestly going away and looking all broken-hearted. And to know that, no matter what he may say at the moment, you are passing quite out of his life. My dear, I must stop here at present. I feel so miserable, though I am so happy.
She sets the letter down for a while. And then, in the evening, she picks it up again.
Evening. Arthur has just gone, and I feel in better spirits than when I left off, so I can go on telling you about the day. Well, my dear, number 2 came after lunch. He is such a nice fellow, an American from Texas. And he looks so young and so fresh that it seems almost impossible that he has been to so many places and has had such adventures. Mr. Quincey P. Morris found me alone. It seems that a man always does find a girl alone. I must tell you beforehand that Mr. Morris doesn't always speak slang. That is to say, he never does so to strangers or before them, for he is really well educated and has exquisite manners. But he found out that it amused me to hear him talk American slang. And whenever I was present, and there was no one to be shocked, he said such funny things. Well, Mr. Morris sat down beside me and looked as happy and jolly as he could, but I could see all the same that he was very nervous. He took my hand in his and said ever so sweetly, "Miss Lucy, I know I ain't good enough to regulate the fixins of your little shoes. But I guess if you wait till you find a man that is, you will go join them 7 young women with the lamps when you quit. Won't you just hitch up alongside of me and let us go down the long road together, driving in double harness?"
Chuckle.
Well, he did look so good-humored and so jolly that it didn't seem half so hard to refuse him as it did poor Dr. Seward. So I said as lightly as I could that I did not know anything of hitching and that I wasn't broken to harness at all yet. Then he said that he had spoken in a light manner, and he hoped that if he had made a mistake in doing so on so grave, so momentous an occasion for him, I would forgive him. He really did look serious when he was saying it, and I couldn't help feeling a bit serious too. And then, my dear, before I could say a word, he began pouring out a perfect torrent of love-making, laying his very heart and soul at my feet. He looked so earnest over it that I shall never again think that a man must be playful always, and never earnest, because he is merry at times. I suppose he saw something in my face which checked him, for he suddenly stopped and said with a sort of manly fervor that I could have loved him for if I had been free. "Lucy, you are an honest-hearted girl, I know. I should not be here speaking to you as I am now if I did not believe you clean grit, right through to the very depths of your soul. Tell me, like one good fellow to another. Is there anyone else that you care for? And if there is, I'll never trouble you a hair's breadth again, but will be, if you will let me, a very faithful friend.
She writes these words carefully, as if she wants to hold them just a moment longer.
My dear Mina, why are men so noble when we women are so little worthy of them? Here was I almost making fun of this great-hearted, true gentleman. I burst into tears. Why can't they let a girl marry 3 men, or as many as want her, and save all this trouble? But this is heresy, and I must not say it. I am glad to say that, though I was crying, I was able to look into Mr. Morris's brave eyes. And I told him out straight, yes, there is someone I love, though he has not told me yet that he even loves me. I was right to speak to him so frankly, for quite a light came into his face. And he put out both his hands and took mine, and said in a hearty way, "That's my brave girl. It's better worth being late for a chance of winning you than being in time for any other girl in the world. Don't cry, my dear. If it's for me, I'm a hard nut to crack, and I take it standing up. If that other fellow doesn't know his happiness, well, he'd better look for it soon, or he'll have to deal with me. Little girl, your honesty and pluck have made me a friend, and that's rarer than a lover. It's more unselfish anyhow. My dear, I'm going to have a pretty lonely walk between this and Kingdom Come. Won't you give me one kiss? It'll be something to keep off the darkness now and then. That quite won me, Mina, for it was brave and sweet of him, and noble too, to a rival. And he's so sad. So I leant over and kissed him. He stood up with my 2 hands in his, and as he looked down into my face, I am afraid I was blushing very much, he said, "Little girl, I hold your hand and you've kissed me, and if these things don't make us friends, nothing ever will. Thank you for your sweet honesty to me. Goodbye." He wrung my hand and, taking up his hat, went straight out of the room without looking back, without a tear or a quiver or a pause. And I'm crying like a baby. Oh, why must a man like that be made unhappy when there are lots of girls about who would worship the very ground he trod on? I know I would if I were free, only I don't want to be free. My dear, this quite upset me, and I feel I cannot write of happiness just at once after telling you of it. And I don't wish to tell of number 3 until it can be all happy. Ever your loving Lucy. P.S. Oh, about number 3. I needn't tell you of number 3, Need I? Besides, it was all so confused. It seemed only a moment from his coming into the room till both his arms were round me and he was kissing me. I am very, very happy. And I don't know what I have done to deserve it. I must only try in the future to show that I am not ungrateful to God for all his goodness to me, in sending to me such a lover, such a husband, and such a friend. Goodbye.
Arthur Holmwood. She does not need to say his name. Both his arms round her, and he was kissing her. That is all. That is everything. I want to rest here for a moment with you. Feel what this chapter is. We have been reading of locks and shadows and things that move in the dark. And here are two young women writing to each other about a man with a charming drawl and a Texas accent, and a doctor who couldn't stop fidgeting with his lancet, and a kiss that was both kind and heartbreaking. This warmth is deliberate. Stoker knew what he was doing. He gave us this brightness so that later, when the shadows come, we would feel their weight more fully. But for now, summer. Letters. Friendship. Joy. But the chapter is not done. We turn now to a different kind of writing. A diary. Kept not in ink, but spoken aloud into a phonograph. The voice belongs to Dr. John Seward. The date is the 25th of May. The day after his refusal.
Ebb tide and appetite today. Cannot eat, cannot rest. So diary instead. Since my rebuff of yesterday, I have a sort of empty feeling. Nothing in the world seems of sufficient importance to be worth a doing. As I knew that the only cure for this sort of thing was work, I went down amongst the patients. I picked out one who has afforded me a study of much interest. He is so quaint that I am determined to understand him as well as I can. Today I seem to get nearer than ever before to the heart of his mystery. I questioned him more fully than I had ever done, with a view to making myself master of the facts of his hallucination. In my manner of doing it there was, I now see, something of cruelty. I seemed to wish to keep him to the point of his madness, a thing which I avoid with the patience as I would the mouth of hell.
The patient's name is R.M. Renfield. 59 years old. Seward notes him carefully.
Sanguine temperament. Great physical strength. Morbidly excitable. Periods of gloom ending in some fixed idea which I cannot yet make out. A possibly dangerous man. Probably dangerous if unselfish.
There is something Seward has noticed about Renfield that he has not yet written down in full. I will tell you what it is. The man catches flies. Not idly, deliberately. With patience and method, like a man building towards something. He keeps them. He accumulates them. And then he began to catch spiders. And then he began to eat them. Seward watches all of this. He is disturbed, yes. But he is also fascinated. Because the method is so clear, even if the purpose is not. Renfield is working towards something. Building something. Accumulating life, small life, one creature at a time. Seward does not yet understand what it means. But he will not look away. He writes it all down. And then there is a short note. A letter from Quincey Morris to Arthur Holmwood. It is in its way the most generous thing in the chapter.
My dear Art, we've told yarns by the campfire in the prairies and dressed one another's wounds after trying a landing at the Marquesas and drunk healths on the shore of Titicaca. There are more yarns to be told, and other wounds to be healed, and another health to be drunk. Won't you let this be at my campfire tomorrow night? There will only be one other, our old pal Jack Seward. He's coming too, and we both want to mingle our weeps over the wine cup. And to drink a health with all our hearts to the happiest man in all the wide world who has won the noblest heart that God has made and the best worth winning. We promise you a hearty welcome and a loving greeting and a health as true as your own right hand. We shall both swear to leave you at home if you drink too deep to a certain pair of eyes. Come. Yours as ever and always, Quincey P. Morris.
Think about what that letter is. A man who proposed yesterday and was refused. Writing today to his rival. Inviting him to dinner. To celebrate. He is not bitter. He is not small. He wants to sit with his friends and raise a glass to the man Lucy chose. He said it himself, didn't he? That's rarer than a lover. It's more unselfish anyhow. Arthur's reply comes by telegram. Just one line.
Count me in every time. I bear messages which will make both your ears tingle. Art.
And there it is. Chapter 5. Letters and proposals and a phonograph spinning in a quiet asylum office. A young woman blushing over a page. Two good men raising a glass to a third. And somewhere in a cell, a patient counting his flies. All of England spread out in the May light. Warm and green and ordinary. For now. And there we rest for now. That was part 1 of Dracula, Jonathan Harker's journey east. The long carriage ride through the mountains, the wolves in the dark, the castle at last coming into view, ancient and enormous and utterly still. And then the Count. That strange, pale, courteous figure, so careful, so controlled, and the slow dawning of what Jonathan had walked into. There is something beautiful about that section of the book, I've always thought. The way it's told in journal entries, one man's careful handwriting, trying to record facts while the facts become impossible. He kept writing. Even when writing felt futile, he kept the journal. There is something quietly brave in that. Let your body rest now. Feel the surface beneath you, solid, warm, still, your hands, your feet, the slow movement of your breath. You are here. You are safe. The story will continue. The setting shifts now west, across the water to England. Mina Murray and her friend Lucy Westenra are on holiday by the sea at Whitby, writing cheerful letters in the summer lights. Something followed the Count when his ship came west. Something is moving toward them through the brightness of ordinary days. We will pick up the thread next time, but for now, rest. Sleep now.